right, Fede. Who are we bringing to the Boteco today?
Mire, so I told my friend Louis to come over. Super cool dude. He is from England, but he currently lives in Sao Paulo. He went to school in the States. He went to UPenn and started his career at Bain doing consulting, then moved to Sao Paulo to work at the real estate company called Loft, and now actually just started his own company called Yuna, which is an AI-powered children's storytelling app. So I think he's going to have a great story about him. He's always liked to write as a side hustle, now turned into a full-time job via Yuna. So let's see what he can tell us more.
All right, let's do it. Bora.
Bora. Welcome to the latest episode of Boteco Talks. We have an amazing guest with us here today, Mr. Louis Markham. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm honored to be here with you guys. I'm excited to drink a beer and learn more about life.
Louis is an enigma in Sao Paulo. So he's British, but he lives in Sao Paulo for several years now. And he is the unofficial mayor of Sao Paulo because he's literally everywhere, Louis. So I'm surprised we got a moment in your schedule to invite you to the Boteco.
What
We're very
an
lucky.
honor. Wow.
No, I'm so happy to be here with you both. I've only heard the best things about the both of you, so I came to see in person what this would be about, and I'm really excited.
That's awesome, Louis, and thank you. I feel the audience is going to really enjoy your story. Can't wait to hear more about Yuna, the company you just started, and how it came to be from the moment we met, actually. I remember one of the first times we met in Sao Paulo, you used to tell me how you were very passionate about writing and how you loved writing. I'll let you go more into detail, but it was clearly somebody who really enjoyed writing. And at the moment, what you did for a living professionally had nothing to do with it. So I think how that eventually became your full-time job and or life's work at the moment is gonna be very interesting to hear. So enough of me rambling, Louis. Please tell us more. How and why did you start writing? How did the creative process influence you personally and professionally?
No, I mean, I would say my writing is not a super happy one. When I was younger, I had big trouble sleep. I had massive nightmares and essentially spent my night looking at. I remember very vividly looking at like a Mickey Mouse clock and watching the minute hands going by because I was just always too afraid to sleep. So I would just watch essentially the night go by. And I ended up just coping through this insomnia that I had throughout my childhood, basically reading and creating universes of stories that I would essentially live in at night. Funnily enough, I thought this was totally normal behavior. I remember learning that this wasn't normal when I think I was like 15. It's a while before. I just thought everyone spent their evening conjuring up different universes and essentially spending the night interacting with characters that they invented there and that's everything. But I was shocked to hear that was actually fairly strange behavior. But that is essentially how I ended up creating this universe of characters, because I would come up with all these sort of mini stories and all these characters, and eventually I thought, well, it makes sense to bring them all together. All these characters, they should meet, even if their stories are not necessarily all in the same place. They should eventually have crossovers and things. And then eventually I started to formalize these characters that I, fell in love with, and essentially turn it into sort of a one giant narrative that I spend pretty much every single day, or certainly most weekends, writing. And I've had the same story that I've been focused on for the last 15 years. So I love what I do purely out of passion. And sure, in terms of how I started my career, I started my career in New York in consulting and really enjoyed that experience. I would definitely do it again if I could. And then I ended up moving to Brazil, mainly because I had 6 months to experience the new Bain gave benefits, to take an adventure outside of Bain. And so I came to Brazil with the intention of staying 6 months, working at Loft, which is a startup here, a unicorn real estate tech company. And again, fell in love with Brazil. I fall in love with things very easily. Fell in love with Brazil and fell in love with Loft as always. And always during that time, writing, this was always something. There's the glue that brings all my life together. And it was only sort of in the tail end of my loft experience that I felt, you know what, I've been working so hard on this world of storytelling, even not professionally, right? It's that just from the point of passion. And the time about 4 years ago, I was starting to really get interested in the story of AI, which to me was fascinating because to me, it's just another character that's almost writing itself to reality. And I thought, well, I had to try and combine these two passions of mine, which is writing and at the time, generative AI, which was, at the time still fairly unknown, that I became really into it. And so I started, I guess, like a side hustle, or at least what was supposed to be a side hustle in the sense that, I spent the weekends trying to build the idea of what would become Yuna, and we can talk about that maybe a little bit later, not to get too far away from the original question. And that's kind of how my side hustle came to be before very quickly turning into a full-time hustle.
Well, just one thing you said, I want to repeat it, or I want you to repeat it. You said you think AI is almost like a character writing itself,
Yeah,
right? Like,
that kind of just came out of
I
my
just thought that
mouth.
was kind of that was so fascinating that you said that. Though. I was like,
It
man,
is
like
true.
that
It
is
is true. I mean, it is your kind of your ghostwriter in a lot of ways, and it becomes this own persona within everything that you might end up building, right?
Right. So you both, I think, took different angles from that point. I think Fede's
That's usually the
angle
case.
is the more practical angle, which is that, in a sense, I think AI will become a little angel on your shoulder that will instantly come up with any art for you on the spot. And I think that merits the whole conversation itself. I think the other angle that was brought up here is more to and in a way, it's actually something that's so fascinating that it actually formed one of the main concepts in my 15-year story that I've been writing. So that's why I feel very strongly about AI, because it is something that I think is so strange. And I don't think we as humans have really realized what we're building yet.
Louis, so what is Yuna?
Nice. So I'll give the sort of grander vision of Yuna, then I'll give more how it came to be. So I guess going back to AI, what I find generative AI to be really exciting, not for the main reasons that most people are. Traditionally, over the last many years, we've been, as humanity, been trending towards richer forms of medium, right? Like movies, gaming, Instagram, things that are very rich on the surface, but that generally tend to involve less activation from the watcher or the experiencer of that medium. And that's fine. That's great. It's great entertainment. That has unfortunately come at the cost of something that's very important to me, which is the world of the imaginary, of writing, of reading, of literature. Something that kept me going when I was younger, as I explained. And so what I'm really excited about generative AI is that it allows for a level of engagement that hasn't before been possible, right? As I mentioned, the little angel on your shoulder, that's able to create content that's so personalized and so interactive. I think people forget that interactive part, which I can come back to later. The personalization is obvious, interactivity is less obvious, but create the level of personalization, interactivity that's so engaging that, and more importantly, it's possible to take that level of engagement and bring it into mediums that weren't usually able to take advantage of engagement. So principally, reading. So in my thesis at Yuna is that we can make a level of reading, of engagement with books that could compete with the engagement of Netflix, for example. Because books could basically essentially reflect your imagination. It could invent through the world of text and therefore the imagination. Text involves the act of imagination, right? Textual meaning lets you imagine it, what it means. It brings this level of engagement and active participation that, as we all instinctively know, is good for the human mind, right? Like when you speak to any parent around the world, they want their kids to read more because they know that reading is good for cognitive development, for the imagination, for creativity, for empathy. So important. And so that's where the idea of So that's where the idea of Yuna came from, which was we had this opportunity to take this essentially magic, which is generative AI, and make reading that has traditionally been on decline, right? Brazil has lost 5 million readers in the last 4 years alone. And the big bet here is that we can make this as engaging as a movie for a child and, by extension for adults too.
That's
Makes
That's
sense?
mind blowing. I have a nephew. His name is Liam. He's amazing. He's 2, and he reads a lot, actually. He loves reading. Just the other day, he made me read the same story 3 times. But I feel like, and me and Fede were just chatting about this as well. A lot of the times as parents, and I'm not a parent, but I see my brother struggle with, like,
Never mind.
if you turn on the TV, right, like, the kid, like, he doesn't want to leave. Even though Liam, in this case, he loves reading, but you got Netflix
Right.
on, you can't take them away. So I think what you're saying is so interesting because I can only imagine, I literally imagine him, he already loves books, but if you give him something that he can play with and interact and it's still a story, I can imagine it's only going to resonate. But he lives in the US, so I guess it's not available here yet.
It's not available in the US yet, but very shortly it will be. So hopefully we'll get Liam.
Yeah.
His
Liam's gonna get on.
personalized book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
But it's really cool that, Yuna really combines AI and this human creativity. And I think that's literally a quote from your website. I'm really curious about your thoughts specifically on the future of books, or we could say entertainment in general, and how you think technology is going to continue to change that.
It's a really interesting question. And I think there's infinite opinions on this discussion. And I think the first thing I want to say is that anyone who claims they know what will happen is an idiot, because this space is moving so fast and in directions that no one would have guessed that there's no one who really knows what's going to happen. So the first thing I will say is my opinions are simply opinion, likely to be incorrect. As someone who knows perhaps more than the average about writing and generative AI, I would say there's slightly more informed opinions, but still, this is a very chaotic space right now. I think we've already sort of touched upon one of my first main thinking, which was the level of engagement, right? I think this is the thing that I'm most interested in because it essentially allows my company, Yuna, this vision of making reading the number one choice for entertainment for children. It makes that possible. I think the other interesting and really hot button issue right now is what is humanity's role in this going forward? And as a writer myself, again, not a professional writer, but as someone who's passionate about writing, this is a topic that's very important to me because I think that it's very important for us to consider where we will play in all of it, and we being human. There is the good way that this all goes, where AI ends up being a tool for all of us, like, the software you might be using to make this podcast that will help you make your human content quicker and therefore better. It'll help you get your ideas into reality quicker. That's the good scenario. And the bad scenario, just really bad for humans, is that, we won't even need any of the 3 of us here anymore. And it will just be, generated from like echoes of our previous work. And so that for me was extremely important from the very beginning of Yuna, given that I have this passion for human creativity, to make a company that really built a generative AI company, because that's really what we are. We wouldn't be here without generative AI. That is really married very deeply with the human spirit, with the human creativity. And so I think this is going to be a really interesting space going forward, not only for books, which is what we're playing in, although I would argue that, these mediums are all going to start to mix in with one another, right? Like Yuna at the end of the day create personalized books, but more and more these books will be interactive in the sense that you can change them going forward. You can make decisions in the book. You can invite your dog into the book and the dog will, it will become a very strange space, but essentially, is it a book? Is it a video game? What is it? It's unclear. I would argue it becomes something entirely different eventually. But for me, it's very important to get this right, because for every Yuna, there's going to be another company that just wants to make something quickly and it's going to use AI to try and make something cheaply, and then suddenly we have, I would say, a force for bad in the world where human writers are essentially just a second thought. And so that's what we're trying to do at Yuna here, is build a storytelling ecosystem where, just like the software that you might be using for this podcast, help the human creativity. That's what we also want to do at Yuna. There will always be a writer, the core of everything we do. And we will invite everyone, writer, illustrator, publisher, and whoever else wants to be involved in this world and this new, brave new world, honestly, they will be the first to be invited instead of, a second thought.
Louis, I think it's fantastic how you acknowledge the fact that AI won't replace the role of a human. And I think that goes a long way, because while right now the medium which you choose is books, you open yourself to the possibility of leveraging technology to really make the concept of storytelling and of human creativity really, call it multi-modular through different mediums, as long as at the forefront is people's, call it, personalized touch and inspirations.
And it resonates a lot with music for me. I mean, that's more my realm than writing, right? Like, you see people coming up with Bad Bunny, like a replica Bad Bunny AI song, right? It sounds like Bad Bunny, but at the end of the day, Bad Bunny or whatever artist we're talking about, they're the only ones who really understand their vision, what the future of music is, right? Like, no
Exactly.
AI, or hey, maybe, unless we don't know what the future is, but no AI is going to really be able to know that. So it's such an interesting debate that I think is happening. I mean, it's happening everywhere.
I will say, and I think this is even a bull case for Yuna, while certainly you can have technology that allows you to create a lot quicker, incorporating different parameters that perhaps a human being would be more challenged to do, the power of somebody owning the story and the fact that there is a person behind that story just makes it that much more impactful. You could take any, I don't know, Bad Bunny lyric or any Taylor Swift lyric and put it and sing it from somebody else, and wouldn't have the impact if you didn't have that personalized and that persona behind it. I mean, Mire, I know we can't get into too much details on some of the campaigns that you've done, but your work is literally showcasing the artist's story, because without them, you could argue that it's just
an audio
sound.
file. Literally just sound.
And
that is a good point.
No, I love that perspective, and I fully agree with it. Without the human touch, without the human writer, which is what we have in our Yuna story, we have a human writer. We've just invited our first guest writers in a couple of weeks ago, and we're ramping that up to have one more writers participating in our platform. Our big bet is that is the difference between a pretty decent personalized story and a story that actually is personalized and there's human soul in it. And we tested this at the beginning. Of course, the average founder might be like, let's just generate 1,000 stories in the space of 10 minutes, and they're all going to be fine, probably. And it's easy to do that. We can do that right now. But what's hard is getting a human being in the room and putting their emotion onto a page, and then having attention. That's how Yuna works, right? Like, spoiler alert, we have a writer that writes out essentially the soul of the story, the structure, the skeleton of the story. And then we use transformers and large language models to put around, the skin or maybe the flesh around that skeleton to give that feeling that the child really is the hero of their own story. And so that's how Yuna works. And that investment into the human part is what I think will separate Yuna from, realistically, there are many other companies probably doing something similar to us, but those people are unlikely to be a combination of writers and tech enthusiasts to the point where they can see the opportunity of marrying the two.
Louis, one thing that we've mentioned often on this podcast and through the realm of personal finance is the power of compound interest. And one thing that I really admire of consultants is the frameworks that they employ to really break down large problems into really manageable pieces and have this really structured kind of decision tree of how they approach things. How did your upbringing in consulting impact how your creativity for writing in general as a side hustle? And then if you saw this approach to be beneficial when you were starting off Yuna as well?
Yeah, really cool question. I am a really disorganized person. My energy is all over the place. My ideas come and spurt here and then there, and they come and go as they please. The idea of breaking big problems down into smaller ones is just a use case of organizing and structuring thought. And what I never realized that I even had learned this at Bain, because, in this case at Bain, where I was in consulting, I didn't even realize I had learned this until I left Bain and worked at Loft originally as a sort of externship 6-month transfer, where suddenly something that was so day-to-day at Bain, which is a big problem with structure, suddenly I became like a standout person in this thing, which was shocking to me because I always considered myself to be completely disorganized. And so it made a huge difference to my career. It made a huge difference to the way I live my life, and I'll get to that in a second. Because at the end of the day, life is just a set of stories, a set of ideas. And the better you can structure them and figure out what each piece means and what it'll do, it will help so much. It helped in my writing life because, I've been trying to write this story for my whole life and so many characters. Suddenly I was like, you know what? I woke up one day after like a couple of years down, right? You know what? I'm going to do this, but I'm going to put this on a framework. And it sounds great, but it really worked. Suddenly I was like, okay, here are my sentences. And you know what? I think I know that there's an ultimate, each of these characters have a particular goal. Okay, so let's put this all on a table. And then, these two characters are at conflict. What are the conflicts? And as soon as I started learning to really put ideas on and structure them, it just makes everything so much clearer, because humans can't multitask. Humans can't remember things too long. So as soon as you can put it into a framework, it really helps. On a personal level, it's amazing. It really helps my writing.
How about when you started Yuna? How did this small micro acts compound into eventually?
Oh, it just helps so much. And I would say I'll give Yuna as an example, but it really, as I mentioned, made a big difference when I came to Loft, where at Bain everything is so structured. Obviously, you have the partner has this, and then you have the team and everything, and then when you go into a case, you have this process, and so they ultimately bring structure to what is essentially a structured problem. It could be any problem, like, oh, how do I get to the shop tomorrow? Or how do I make this revenue go from 5 to 10? I don't know. It can be anything. And so I really noticed that this really helped when I came to Loft, which at the time, I think a Series B company, had no structure whatsoever. And suddenly being able to take what was all of this information that no one really had any idea what was going on, and just put even the fake idea of structure. Remember, it's never rare that the framework you're using is really the right one. Just having taken all those floating numbers and all these floating ideas and just putting them and sticking them down, people just respond to it, because suddenly they can see and organize their own thoughts through your thoughts. And so at Yuna, I definitely at this point I wouldn't say I'd mastered the skill, but it's become somewhat second nature. But of course, Yuna, which is at this moment a pre-seed company, there is no structure. We have a vision. The vision, of course, will change. We learn every day something completely different. The vision is there to give some semblance of a guiding light, but realistically, everything will change every month. And that's it. You need to give structure to things that ultimately don't realistically have structure. But by doing so, you're able to organize your thoughts. You're able to bring confidence to the team, and you're able to let your team work on a particular subset of what you're working on. So look, I don't think it's about top tip here. Everyone's heard of like the consulting frameworks and everything. Yeah, they're a good way to sort of start thinking about how problems can be broken down. But ultimately, what shocks me the most is that it's just so obvious now how it works, probably because I've done so many reps. If you have a problem or something that you don't know how to do, this sounds so obvious. Write it down and then just start writing down what you think the smaller pieces would be. I know I'm literally just saying what it's breaking down a problem, but people rarely just write down. Just write down.
Yeah.
That there's no magic. It's just stop what you're doing, write down a piece of paper, and what do you think the smaller components are?
I'm a huge fan of mind maps, actually. I don't know if you guys have ever tried it, but you
Nice.
literally put in like the main problem in the middle of the paper. And then what you were saying, I do sub buckets like that, but I'm more of a visual person. I'm sure for some people it's better to like write it down and list it. For Fede, I'm sure he lists it out in bullets specifically. But yeah, I feel like that always helps ground me on like, okay, like what am I trying to achieve? If not, I'm kind of like you where like I have ideas and they're all everywhere. And if I don't put them down,
And just
I'm
gotta,
never gonna get anywhere.
nail them down. Just nail them down, and then you'll see the flaws in your ideas, or you'll see the opportunities. Like just to give you a super tactical, real example, Yuna is like, what is Yuna? What is Yuna's like 1 to 2 year, which means nothing, like product vision? It's not even a product vision. I don't even know what you call it, but I just felt like I had to write it down. It's like, okay, well, and so for me, I think in terms of pillars, always I like popping going downward, not in a bullet point list, but just kind of like a big central problem. And I like sort of putting little pillars. This probably comes from the consulting framework. But it's like, so I guess it is in there somewhere. But like, like what does our product need to be in 2 years that what do I need to work on? And for me, it was like, eventually it became very quickly, not with too much refinement, or maybe a little bit of refinement, but okay, we need a level of personalization so that people really feel that they are the hero of their own story, a level of interactivity that they're not only the hero of the story, but they can read into the book and impact the book. That's something that's just, never been possible before. And that's the interactivity, remember I mentioned about that people are not talking enough about this. Not just that an AI can write a story where you're the hero, but like you can stop the film director at any point and say, actually, I want, this person to be there. And then, that will also be really interesting.
Is that kind of like a choose your own experience?
Yeah, exactly. It can be choose your own. You know what? Interactivity to me, in a sense, there is that. Choose your own experience. Putting the sound of a storm in the story with you, and then when you see the word pig, you click on it and it makes a sound. It's just a sense of you being able to engage with your imagination.
Yeah.
Like you are in your imagination, you are connected to it instead of right now you read a book and, God bless book, they're amazing things. You're basically, these words are projecting a world into your mind. Well, this interactivity allows you to reach into your mind and play with it. So that's the second pillar. And then the third one, which is content, which, it's such an ugly word for what is essentially story writing. But, like for that's extremely important, having amazing stories. That is an absolute core value of Yuna. And then finally, community. Like we really want to not only like parenting community, which is what we're focused on right now, is how do we help people build a reading habit, but also storytelling community. 4 things. And then I showed it to the team, and I remember I told the team, and then one of the team members that messed me up and said, man, wow, that really helped. Personal, all right. So going back to the original point, people, I think at the end of the day, don't be afraid of the problem. Ultimately, the big problem is just a set of small ones. Go write down those smaller problems on the page. They don't have to be correct. It's the exercise that helps.
Let's get a little bit into finance. So I'm assuming launching your own company required some financial planning, or probably a lot of financial planning, you'll tell me. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the financial hurdles you encountered? You also mentioned that you guys are at pre-seed round. What does that look like for you, or what was the strategy around that?
Nice. So the first piece of context that's important here is that when Yuna was first conceived in my mind, like really forming sort of a more businessy idea of it. The idea of Yuna had been around in my head for many years, but like putting it into practice, it came around originally more as a side hustle, right? As something smaller, something to, in the process of learning how to combine the beauty of writing with the scary but potentially amazing world of generative AI, maybe there was some way to have a small business from it. And so, but very much a side thing in the sense that it was never supposed to become a full-time dream and a full-time pursuit. So a side hustle, as it were, because I was full-time working at Loft. And so I did have a full-time salary. And so there was no financial planning at this point in time. However, when I started to build up a real hunger to pursue this to its logical conclusion, which to me was, becoming clearer and clearer, which is we can make reading as engaging as Netflix. We can make reading the number one choice in parents. When I started to sort of show the prototypes to parents and see their reactions, and some mothers were filming their kids reacting live and sending it to me to hearing their name and their family and their interest with stories for the first time, I just got so excited that suddenly I was having conversations with bigger funds, and very quickly, literally within, let's call it 2 weeks, having a term sheet, which is, just for those who don't know, essentially an offer to fund the company at a pre-seed stage, in this case, a pre-seed stage, to really make this vision come to life. So at that point, there had been no, up till that point, there had been no financial planning. However, where I did find myself really needing to sort of think carefully was as someone who had been working in Brazil through Loft, and therefore whose visa was tied to Loft. Once this company got funding, I obviously left Loft and found myself, with a business and not being able to pay myself for 9 months. And so that involved careful planning to ensure that I could essentially, keep going for several months without any income. And I can say that thankfully, recently, I was able to pay myself for the first time after almost a year of working. Yeah, thank you very much, guys. So I am now able to celebrate a little bit more.
You can officially go out to dinner once again. And
Exactly.
dinner.
Well, I have to say that was one area of spending that I failed to cut down too much, just because I'm such a bad cook. I have negative skills with the kids, so that's definitely real.
Louis, thank you so much. This conversation has been super inspiring. To leave off, though, I wanted to ask you, and I feel like you already gave a lot of advice, but if there was one piece of advice that you would leave for our listeners, for someone who wants to start their own company or wants to turn their side hustle into a full hustle or wants to even just start to think about something, what would you say to them?
Look, it might be a little bit of a cliche, what I'm about to say, although it's somewhat of a cliche and it's not, and I don't really hear people saying it certainly this way. But life is, at least for me, the way I see life is a set of stories. I'm sorry to keep coming back to the stories, it's almost like I've got problems of stories in my head, but I truly believe that. Like last week, if I didn't have any stories happening in the sense of like some funny incident or some dramatic incident, if I didn't remember last week, did it really happen? So for me, I live life trying to make stories happen, whether that's something special, going out of my comfort zone, and I think that applies to starting a side hustle or starting your own business or, taking a leap of faith, whether it's in your career or in other areas unrelated to work. Life is a story, make sure you have the financial stability that you need. That's obviously key. But if you're able to do that, then make stories, take risks, have fun. Somewhat cliche, but I do truly feel that way, and that's how I try to live my life.
Louis, Steve Jobs once said that the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. And I think the fact that you're empowering people to be the owners of their own story is really inspiring and is a great gift that you're providing families, users. I met you when you were at Loft. I recently last saw you when you were about to come out of stealth and announce Yuna. And you clearly are really passionate about what you're doing. So I congratulate you for that. Thank you so much for joining us at Boteco Talks. Please follow us on Instagram, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening to this too. And we'll see you next time at the Boteco.
Cheers.
Saúde.
Saúde.
Cheers.
Boteco, Boteco Talks, Boteco Talks.